Every broken Clash Royale card explained in XY minutes. Monk. The Monk is one of those cards that instantly changed how Clash Royale felt when it dropped. The moment it entered the arena, people started calling it broken. You could see it everywhere, from casual matches to competitive play, and the reason was simple. The Monk could do everything. He hit hard, he tanked like a champ, and he had a special ability that could flip fights you were supposed to lose. His Pensive Protection made him almost untouchable, reducing incoming damage by a massive 80%, and even sending projectiles right back at your opponent. That ability alone could turn a whole match around, especially when a Musketeer or Magic Archer ended up blasting themselves instead. When the Monk released in late 2022, he basically made the Knight look like a joke. Players built decks around him because there was almost no reason not to. His defense was solid and his offense was scary. It felt unfair to fight against him because even good counterplays failed to stick. Reddit was flooded with complaints about him being unkillable and clips of matches where he completely erased pushes that should have destroyed him. The developers eventually had to tone him down by tweaking his stats, but even after those nerfs, people still talk about that first release month like it was a nightmare. The Monk became the symbol of a card that was way too safe to use. If you dropped him on the field, you knew you were getting value no matter what. That level of consistency made him one of the most broken cards in Clash Royale history. Phoenix. The Phoenix is pure chaos in feathered form. When it came out alongside the Monk in late 2022, it quickly became the talk of the community because of its ability to literally come back to life. The card could deal huge damage, and then, after dying, respawn as if nothing happened. That rebirth made it feel like you were playing against two Phoenixes for the price of one, and opponents hated it. At the start, people had no clue how to deal with it. You would finally take it down, only to watch it rise again and burn through your support troops. Players discovered that pairing Phoenix with other high-value cards made their decks terrifying. It worked especially well with splash damage troops and tanks because the Phoenix could handle air threats while those troops cleaned the ground. For a while, every second match felt like it had a Phoenix in it, and no matter what you did, it always found a way to stay alive. When Supercell eventually nerfed its rebirth mechanic, it was a relief for the community, but that short reign of terror cemented its place in Clash Royale history. The Phoenix became known as the card that broke the meta for a month straight and made everyone rethink air defense. Even now, people still joke about how every deck back then was just throw Phoenix in and win. That level of dominance is what defines a truly broken card. Goblin Machine. Goblin Machine is one of those cards that look normal on paper but turned out to be secretly busted. Once you dropped it behind a tank, it kept firing non-stop, and the opponent either wasted elixir trying to take it out or watched their tower melt. For a while, it dominated matches because it was both a pressure tool and a defense card rolled into one. The problem with Goblin Machine was how consistent it was. It did not rely on risky combos or fancy tricks. It forced out your opponent's spells and bought time for your next push. Many players called it unfair because it could trade so efficiently that it always came out ahead in elixir. The moment you saw that green contraption on the field, you knew you were about to lose control of the game. At its peak, it was so strong that entire decks were built around it. Players on Reddit joked that Goblin Machine was not a card but a lifestyle. It became a meme for how ridiculous some balance updates could be. Eventually, Supercell stepped in and adjusted its fire rate and health, which finally made it manageable again. This card is one of those cards that reminds everyone how quickly something can go from balanced to broken in Clash Royale. Electro Giant. Electro Giant is the definition of a card that feels unfair the first time you face it. When it first dropped, players thought it was just another tank until they realized it didn't just absorb damage, it punished you for attacking it. The reflection mechanic made low-cost defenses completely useless. Every time you tried to counter it with swarm troops or quick hitters like Skeleton Army or Inferno Dragon, the Electro Giant would zap them out of existence just by being hit. This made it feel almost untouchable. You would place down your best defense and watch your own troops fry themselves while it kept rolling straight to your tower. It punished aggression in a way no other card did. Suddenly, the best strategy against it was to wait it out, which went against the entire rhythm of Clash Royale. It flipped the usual fast-paced gameplay into this slow, frustrating push game that most players hated. To be fair, the card wasn't unbeatable. It cost a lot of elixir, and without support, it struggled to reach the tower. But early on, people hadn't figured that out yet. Players would just drop it and steamroll, because its counterplay wasn't obvious. The community reaction was wild. Half the players called it skillless, while the other half said everyone just needed to learn the matchup. The truth is somewhere in the middle. Electro Giant wasn't broken forever, but during that first meta, it absolutely warped the game. When Supercell finally nerfed its damage reflection and hit points balance was restored, but that memory of helplessly watching your troops fry themselves still lingers. Sparky. Sparky is a funny one because depending on when you played Clash Royale, you either remember it as a joke or a complete nightmare. When it first came out, it was one of the scariest cards in the game. One clean shot from Sparky could delete almost any troop, and if it locked onto your tower, that was game over. People called it broken because the damage numbers were absurd. But Sparky has always lived on that fine line between unstoppable and easily countered. Early players didn't yet understand timing or how to distract it, so Sparky dominated lower arenas. A single giant or golem in front and Sparky behind could wipe out entire defenses. You could literally watch your troops disappear in one blast. Players called it unfair because even if you predicted it, sometimes the charge shot came out too fast to react to. As the game evolved, people learned how to shut it down with Zap Electro Wizard or Lightning, which made it less terrifying. But back in its early days, Sparky was infamous. It was the card that made people rage quit. You could hear the sound of that charge winding up and instantly know your tower was gone. What makes Sparky still fascinating is that it never really left the spotlight. Every time a new balance change hits or new support cards are released, someone finds a way to make Sparky broken again. Whether you love it or hate it, everyone who has played Clash Royale has at least one story of Sparky ruining their match. It might not be broken today, but its legacy as one of the most rage-inducing cards ever is undeniable. Dart Goblin. Dart Goblin doesn't look broken at first glance. He's tiny and fragile and costs only 3 elixir. But anyone who has faced a skilled player using him knows how ridiculous this little guy can get. His range is insane, his fire rate is blistering, and if you don't handle him immediately, he can shred your tower before you even realize what's happening. What made Dart Goblin feel broken wasn't raw stats, it was efficiency. You could place him behind your tower and he'd pick off enemy troops from across the arena. He didn't trade evenly, he traded up. He could outdamage cards that cost more, and he was so fast that even when players tried to predict him, he'd still sneak in hits. The funniest part is that he was never meant to be overpowered. On paper, he looked balanced, but in practice, his long range and quick cycle made him one of the most annoying support units ever created. Decks like Logbait and Cycle decks made him shine because he'd sit behind Goblin barrels or princesses and just keep firing. There were entire matches where Dart Goblin alone did more tower damage than your win condition. Players called him broken because of how safe he felt to use. Even if he died instantly, he always got value. 1 or 2 quick hits from him equaled solid chip damage. The only way to fully stop him was to spend more elixir than he cost, which made every trade go in his favor. He's one of those cards that's always quietly strong even when he's not the focus of the meta. Ice Golem. Ice Golem is one of those cards that looks harmless, but ends up being the definition of broken in the right hands. It's cheap, it's simple, and it's only supposed to be a distraction card, yet somehow, it manages to control entire games. At just 2 elixir, it's one of the most efficient cards in Clash Royale's history. You can throw it in front of almost any push, and it buys you time. You can kite entire troops across the arena, you can pair it with Balloon or Hog Rider, and suddenly, your win condition is getting free hits while Ice Golem tanks and slows everything down. The slow effect is what made this card feel so unfair at certain points. That Death Nova doesn't look like much, but it completely ruins the tempo of your opponent's counter push. If you're playing against fast attacking cards like Mini P.E.K.K.A. or Barbarians, that little chill can mean the difference between your tower surviving with 100 HP or getting completely demolished. For just 2 elixir, that level of value is ridiculous. When it first became meta, people called it broken because it made low-cost cycle decks unstoppable. Hog Ice Golem was a nightmare combination. You'd spend 6 or 7 elixir defending a push, and they'd cycle back to another hog in seconds because Ice Golem made everything so cheap. Even its defensive potential was insane. The ability to kite P.E.K.K.A. or Prince all the way across the arena just by dropping a 2 elixir tank felt like cheating. Supercell tried adjusting it, but you can't really nerf simplicity. Ice Golem's strength isn't in its stats, it's in how flexible it is. It can tank damage, it can delay troops, it can reset momentum. It can even protect squishier cards like Musketeer or Dart Goblin for just long enough. Calling it broken might sound dramatic, but when you realize how often it turns bad trades into good ones, you start to see why players keep calling for nerfs, even years later. It's one of those cards that's never overpowered on paper, but always ends up being better than it has any right to be. Boss Bandit isn't broken in the traditional sense, but it's one of those cards that constantly makes people underestimate it. On paper, it looks balanced, a simple troop that dashes between targets, dealing solid damage and resetting its charge each time. But in practice, the Bandit has this strange mix of mobility and burst power that keeps it relevant in almost every meta. She slips through defenses, punishes bad placements, and forces fast reactions. What makes Boss Bandit so tricky is how unpredictable she can be. One mistimed drop and she's already dashing straight to your tower. Her charge mechanic makes her almost invincible while moving, which means if your timing is even slightly off, she'll survive hits that should have finished her. That's why players often call her fake balanced. She doesn't dominate every match, but she constantly creates unfair moments where you feel like you did everything right and still lost. In the right hands, the Boss Bandit becomes a nightmare. Pair her with control decks or bridge spam setups and she turns tiny openings into instant tower damage. She's the perfect example of a card that rewards quick reflexes and punishes hesitation. Even though she's not statistically overpowered, her ability to flip pressure so fast makes her feel broken in the moment. Boss Bandit might never reach the chaos levels of Mega Knight or Electro Giant, but she stays relevant in every update because of how flexible and skill expressive she is. She's proof that sometimes a card doesn't need to be overpowered to feel unfair. It just needs to be fast, smart, and always one dash ahead of your defense. Goblin Giant. The Goblin Giant is one of those cards that just feels unfair when it is working and completely useless when it is not, but during its strong phases it was undeniably broken. The idea sounded harmless. A tanky win condition carrying 2 spear goblins on its back to help chip damage. Cute, right? Except those 2 little goblins could melt defenses faster than most players expected. The Goblin Giant could march down a lane and act like a walking siege machine. Even if you dropped a building to stop it, the spear goblins would keep poking from behind, forcing you to spend extra elixir just to stay alive. It was especially annoying in the double elixir. Players would pair it with Sparky or Double Prince, and suddenly the opponent's arena looked like total chaos. The Goblin Giant soaked up everything, while its tiny passengers destroyed whatever stood in the way. You would drop a mini P.E.K.K.A, thinking you were fine, but then the spear goblins would shred it anyway. It created this weird zone where your counters never felt worth it. During its peak meta, many players complained not because it was unbeatable, but because it punished even small mistakes too harshly. One wrong card cycle and the entire push rolled over you. It was a perfect example of why Clash Royale can sometimes feel more about who makes the first error than pure skill. The Goblin Giant eventually got nerfed, but the memory of its dominance stuck around. When a card combines a tank's durability with built-in damage support, you get something that will always flirt with being broken. Balloon. The Balloon is one of those cards that make your heart drop when you see it drifting toward your tower. It looks innocent until you realize it can delete half your health bar with one drop. That is why it has been called broken more than once in Clash Royale's history. Unlike cards that chip slowly, the Balloon delivers massive burst damage. One connection can change the entire match, and 2 mean the game is basically over. Its problem has always been how limited its counters are. Air defense in Clash Royale is tricky. If you are out of cycle or slightly late, the Balloon will connect. Even when you defend perfectly, a single freeze can ruin everything. The Balloon freeze combo became infamous because it punished perfect defense. Players would spend all their elixir to stop the push, only for the Balloon to be frozen in place just long enough to drop 2 bombs. The Balloon's synergy potential made it even worse. Pair it with Miner for chip pressure or Ice Golem for tanking, and suddenly you are looking at one of the strongest offensive combos in the game. It never felt fair because it punished under-defending too harshly, and yet it was not exactly unbeatable either. It just demanded perfect timing from whoever faced it. Supercell has adjusted it multiple times, but no amount of balancing seems to fully remove its reputation. Anytime the meta weakens, air counters, the Balloon becomes dominant again. It is the kind of card that will always feel broken because its entire design revolves around high risk and huge reward, and when you are the one losing to it, that reward feels way too big. Mega Knight. The Mega Knight is the very definition of chaos in Clash Royale. From the moment he dropped into the arena, he broke the game in the eyes of many players. He is huge, he jumps, he slams, and he wipes out anything that dares to gather in one spot. On paper, he looks like just another tanky unit, but in reality, he is an entire army killer packed into one card. The moment you hear that heavy thud as he lands, you already know half your push is gone. His spawn damage alone can delete whole groups of troops, and that makes him one of the most frustrating cards to face when you are not ready. What makes the Mega Knight so controversial is how easily he flips defense into offense. You can drop him on top of an enemy push and watch everything disappear, then immediately watch him march across the bridge with half health still intact. Pair him with support troops like a Firecracker or Electro Wizard, and suddenly your counter push becomes unstoppable. Even low skill players can make him look terrifying, because his kit does so much by itself. At his peak, the Mega Knight ruled mid-ladder matches and haunted challenges everywhere. Players spammed him to no end because he gave instant value with almost no punishment. You could argue that he taught people bad habits, but he also defined an entire era of frustration and memes. Everyone has that memory of thinking they had the game in the bag until a Mega Knight landed and wiped everything. That is why people call him broken, not because his stats are unbeatable, but because he makes the game feel unfair whenever he is in the right hands. The Mega Knight might not dominate every meta today, but his presence never disappears for long. Every time balance changes shift and lighter decks take over, someone always brings him back to remind the arena who the real boss is. He is loud, flashy, destructive, and always finds a way to make players rage quit. If any card deserves to be called broken, it is him, Hog Rider. Hog Rider is easily one of the most iconic cards in Clash Royale. His wild yell and reckless charge define the fast-paced chaos that makes the game fun, but at the same time, he has been called broken for how easily he can win matches in the right hands. He is fast, cheap, and hits like a truck. There is no setup, no waiting, just drop him down and watch him go straight for the tower. That simplicity is what makes him deadly. The thing about Hog Rider is that he is too consistent. Even when the meta changes and new cards come and go, the Hog somehow stays relevant. He does one job and he does it perfectly. He hits towers. His ability to bypass distractions and head directly for the main objective makes him a nightmare for anyone without proper defense. You miss one placement with your building, and he is already halfway through your tower health. When paired with cheap cycle cards, he becomes even worse. The famous 2.6 Hog deck lets players send him out over and over before you can even catch your breath. It feels oppressive because it is constant pressure, and no other win condition does that with such efficiency. You never get time to reset. You are either defending the Hog or saving elixir for the next one. People argue that Hog Rider takes skill, and to be fair it does, but that does not make it any less frustrating. A good Hog player can dismantle almost any deck just by reading cycles and predicting placements. That level of reliability is why he is often labeled broken. He is the ultimate test of consistency in Clash Royale, and sometimes that feels like too much power for a 4 elixir card. Furnace. For a long time, the Furnace was that quiet card you never really noticed until it ruined your tower. It sat there, spitting out fire spirits like clockwork, forcing you to waste elixir every few seconds just to stop tiny balls of fire from touching your tower. It was slow, annoying, and yet painfully effective. Back then, the Furnace wasn't about flashy plays or fast pushes, it was about patience and control. Matches dragged on because once a Furnace hit the field, you knew the game was about to turn into a war of attrition. Then came the rework. Suddenly the Furnace wasn't that background structure anymore. It became a threat. The new version has been reworked into a troop that spawns fire spirits, which deal heavier damage and target smarter. Players immediately realized how broken it was. You couldn't ignore it because every wave of fire spirits guaranteed chip damage while also backing up pushes. Within days, the card went from being "oh that thing again" to "please no, not this deck again." The latter turned into a Furnace festival. Everyone was using it. It didn't matter if you were a control player, a bridge spammer, or a bait specialist. The card fit everywhere. The moment you dropped it, you had automatic pressure, defensive value, and chip damage all rolled into one. It felt like having a win condition disguised as a building. But balance never lasts long in Clash Royale. Just a few weeks after that rework, Supercell stepped in and toned it down. The Fire Spirits lost some power, the timing felt less aggressive, and the Furnace finally stopped dominating every matchup. Still, it didn't fall off the map. It just shifted into a healthier state. Now, the Furnace sits in that sweet middle ground between control and pressure. It's not overpowered, but it's still scary in the right hands. It can defend pushes, support counterattacks, and force opponents to constantly react. The best players use it to control the flow of the match, keeping opponents under constant pressure without overspending. The Furnace has evolved from a boring stall card to a well-balanced utility that defines smart play. It's not broken anymore, but the memory of that rework era still burns in every player who had to face it.